let's start out, maybe we should do this one at a time instead of just say, let's start with the first thing. What is the first great solution? And then we'll get to another one. What's the first great solution that if you were running the country, if you were running the world, what should we be doing if you actually had the voice? If the president saw this video, if Bill Gates saw this video, what's step one that you think or you know we could or should be doing?
You go.
I'd love this question, and I think it's a defining question for our time in a way. I think what you're describing in many ways are a collection of symptoms, and if I look at it as a physician, I'm thinking, what's the underlying diagnosis? And I think the underlying diagnosis, sustainability is inevitable. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of how radical a disruption it's going to take for us to get to a point, and what's going to be left when we get to that point of sustainability. I think what we're looking at as a diagnosis is the profound disruption of our entire economic system by fossil fuels over a very long period. And so we're trying, as we try to transition to a sustainable, solar-powered, renewable society, we think, that just doesn't fit the way we live and this world that we've created. And the reason it doesn't fit is because we have lived in this artificial world created by fossil fuels and easy energy for a very long time. In terms of what we can do, I think the first thing we have to do is really reimagine the present and the future much more aggressively than we are doing. I think that the last time we had a sustainable solar-powered society was the 18th century, and there were about 1 billion people in the world. We have to actually go back and look at the 18th century, think about how people lived, and say, okay, if we took modern technologies and we reimagined the 18th century in a way that was, where we brought what was useful from the present, how could we live? How can we change our society to be something that is sustainable and in a way that will not require the kinds of disruption that will happen if we just go with the status quo?
If I was the president, have I got it on? Yeah. If I was the president, I'd love to be the president.
I'll vote for you.
Just imagine what you could do. You've got the bully pulpit. You're the commander-in-chief. You've got access to the media. And I would use that access to educate and inspire the population about all these issues. The threat of nuclear war, teach them. I'd teach them about global warming, why it's happening, and who's running the government, like the corporations who are producing global warming. I would use the bully pulpit to make sure the corporations didn't have the power they'd had. I'd not violate, but cancel Citizens United so that money can't be poured into campaigns. I'd make voting compulsory. I would, as in Australia, if we don't vote, we get fined $50. Let me think, what else was I going to do? I would, educate people about global warming and all the ramifications of that and the medical consequences, because I'm a doctor and I'd be a physician president, and then explain to everyone how we can alleviate global warming, and the solutions are all here. And we heard today from Seth about what can be done. It's all there. We just have to change the minds of the people, and if the people move, the politicians move. If the people don't move and the people remain ignorant, the politicians are the servants of the corporations. The corporations move into the vacuum left by the people. I'd educate the people about 80,000 chemicals in common use that we use all the time, most of which have not been tested by the EPA for carcinogenicity. I changed the law so it was up to the chemical companies to prove these chemicals were safe and not up to us to prove that they're dangerous. I would teach people about the dangers of nuclear power and how cancer is caused, and I'd close down all the nuclear reactors in this country. I think that's probably, and covers it.
It's a good start, yeah.
That was a lot more than one.
Oh, was it one? No, I was going to be president,
Yeah,
so that's
that-
one.
That's the
One
one.
was president.
Electee
Right.
president is the one, yeah. I think if I had to pick one thing, Robert hit the nail on the head that underlying all of the symptoms that Steve described is our use of fossil fuels, or almost all of the problems. And so the question is, what is the one thing that we can do? The most powerful thing to get us off fossil fuels is something I talked about in my lecture, is putting the cost, the real cost of those fossil fuels in front of the consumer through a carbon tax. People don't like the word tax, but putting the price on carbon that it actually costs us. We're all paying it already, but we don't realize it, and so we're making the wrong choices. If you put that tax on carbon, suddenly burning those fossil fuels, you know it's expensive. As I said, it already is, but you don't know it. Then you would know it, and then you're going to stop doing it.
Hello? I certainly agree with Seth that we have to price the problem in effect, and whether you call it a tax or a cap and trade or fee and dividend, there's several ways to do it, but there's a hidden cost, just like there was with cigarette smoking and cancer, and it certainly comes from heating this planet. That's going to have effects on drought and disease and all these other things. But I hate to say it's not as simple as we might like to think, because at 7 billion people, back to Bob's mention that we had 1 billion people back in the 1800s. We're now 7 billion headed to 10. We've got to be realistic here. And if we're going to advocate solutions, I mean, I agree with Seth's approach that we need to get things into the marketplace. Educating people is fine, but Obama's been trying to educate people about some climate change things. People don't want to hear it, okay? He certainly tried some things, whether you disagree with his approach or not. We've tried to educate people about lots of things, and yet money and its Citizens United, as Helen said, and she's right, is unfortunately an abysmal legal situation. But here we are. We've got to start thinking about the future like a few generations hence. How we get there is going to be hard enough, but I think we almost have to re-envision what the world's like. Now, some of you might think that there should be no cattle or beef consumption or dairy, and that's possible, let's say. But again, how do you educate the world or motivate them or come up with a system that's going to get to sustainability, back to that phrase? People imply that we know the answer. We don't know the answer. Helen and I disagree about whether there should be nuclear power. Now, there's no right or wrong. There really isn't right or
didn't know
wrong.
we disagreed.
We disagree.
Do we?
Yes, we do.
Oh.
Yeah. I think that I thought that was clear last
You
night.
want to fight?
No, I don't want to fight. I didn't know you were like that.
I am.
That the fact is, carbon and warming this planet is going to cause huge problems. And if you take the 28% or whatever it is that nuclear power provides off the table at the moment, that just creates a higher burden of how we're going to create out of solar energy. I don't know whether we should have nuclear or not, frankly, okay? But my point is that with this many people trying to give them enough protein, and if you want it, and water that's safe, and deal with the disease issues that are going to change as climate's changing, and there's a limit to how much solar we can produce, how quickly, and other renewables. We've got to be realistic. There's no point in just wishing things were going to be solved, because we're dealing in a world of reality here. And whether it be that the growth that's going to happen in Asia and Africa in population is going to double in the next 30 or 40 years, we feel a humanitarian issue there, many of us. It's a complex situation. I don't think even if any of us were president of not only the United States or the world, that there's a simple answer. So I have to start with that. I do think the free market needs to be used. I don't think dictatorial, government-centered control is the answer. I actually embrace the free market, but we've distorted the free market. Corn ethanol is a good example. It's not good gas, but it was implemented because a lot of people with those refineries making corn ethanol made a lot of money, and the farmers got a better price for corn, and we jacked up the price of food, and it was really stupid policy to use corn ethanol in our gas tanks in the name of energy independence. So we don't, I mean, some of us may think we have the right answer, but in a world of 7 billion people headed to 10 billion inevitably now, with the disease and nutrition problems we have, there is not a simple answer. But I do think we have to find ways to get it into the marketplace and get out of the distortions to the marketplace.